Welcome to On the Issues. This is a show where we report, rebel, and we tell it just like it is. And in this episode, we begin it with a warning given the gravity of the subject matter. In this episode, we will hear from Jessica Michaels, a sexual assault awareness advocate who was sexually assaulted by Jeffrey Epstein in her early adulthood. I spoke with Jess about meeting Jeffrey Epstein, the manipulative way he recruited and trafficked young women just like her, and also her experience as a survivor of sexual assault. She now works as an advocate, and I wanted to know what she wants the public to know about sexual violence as news about Epstein and his connections to powerful men and women continues to spill forward. This series is part of our ongoing coverage of the Epstein files. Attention to the women that continue to suffer and those that are fighting back, surviving. In our series, we unpack the record, combing through the various emails, speaking with reporters, and asking fundamental questions, such as what does it take to treat women and girls with dignity and respect? For backdrop, in July, the Justice Department released a controversial report about Jeffrey Epstein, now a known and notorious sexual predator and human trafficker. As a result of the political fallout after the DOJ report, Jeffrey Epstein and his alleged connections to President Trump, and there are many images of them together, now it's been in the headlines for months, with denials from the current president about really knowing Jeffrey Epstein at all. We've seen with Ghislaine Maxwell the shifting of her from a high security prison to one of minimal security with special privileges at that space. We've been hearing from the voices of survivors, at least we've been paying attention at Ms. Magazine and Ms. Studios, and we've wondered why they haven't gotten equal coverage in major media. The House Oversight Committee has yet to hear testimony from Epstein survivors, despite urging efforts by Representative Ayanna Pressley and others. In this episode, we're looking to shift the focus to where it belongs, on survivors and what justice means to them. Jess, thank you very much for joining me for our Ms. Studios, Ms. Platform podcast. You've shown incredible bravery and courage by telling your story, by coming out to tell your story. So let me just start with something that is open-ended, that just simply allows you to just speak. Tell us what you experience and what you think the public should know.
That's a great question. Thank you so much for having me, Michele. And thank you so much for asking that question, because people aren't really asking that question. I just had a discussion with my therapist today about this, and the things that I think people don't know and don't see is that I come on and I speak, and I have a lot of a great feeling of accomplishment because I'm finding my words when I for so long couldn't. I'm finding my voice when for so long I couldn't. And so for me, every time I get the opportunity to speak, it feels like this wonderful sense of empowerment. But one of the things that I have been grappling with, and I explained to my therapist, I said, then why am I so tired and sad afterwards? And we know that I had a physiological response from having frozen by being raped. We know that that was my physiological response, and that is what I carried with me for 30 years of post-traumatic stress disorder, which I like to call post-traumatic stress injury, because I was injured, not disordered. That my body, could just be still in that habit of shutting down. That's one. Two, because of post-traumatic stress disorder, I deal with adrenal fatigue, having been stressed that long, and it just is exhausting to talk about, even though I don't feel like I'm reliving it. I don't feel re-triggered talking about it. I can still have an exhaustion that is otherworldly, that makes it difficult to climb stairs. But then thirdly, we talked about something that I think is something that nobody recognizes is that the more that I heal and the more I gain my voice, and the more I feel so proud of myself for what I'm able to now get to, the more I recognize that 22-year-old girl and all of the potential of that self actualization that I lost at that young age. And I am grappling with a lot of grief right now.
I hear you. And in part, I think what you're um, sharing and is probably felt by so many of our listeners who have had a similar experience or know those who have had is that the complexity of response, the
Yes.
complexity of
Yes.
response at the time of being harmed when someone is harming you, and the complexity along the way, because one version of that response is, in fact, to try to heal oneself in the immediate, to
Yeah.
try to put some armor over oneself, where even there is the question in the deep spaces of abuse and harm, where one questions, have I really been abused and harmed?
Yes, yes. And we push through. We just, one of the things I was saying today too, to my fabulous advancing therapist, I said the one thing I can go back and look at is that regardless of how deeply down this dark hole I went, I still just kept trying. I just kept trying. And and I think that I have so much more compassion for that girl now that was in her 20s and struggling through her 20s and 30s because I was beating
Well,
her up to make it through. I think I was beating her up to make it through. Like, come on, you're being lazy. Come on, get out of bed. Stop sleeping. It doesn't hurt that bad. You can keep going. And I would berate myself for so long.
mhm.
And so, yeah, I know you can really understand what I'm saying.
I can. And when one pulls back, aren't those also the expectations in a society
Yes.
that for so long has not respected, given space for, shown consideration and grace for the concerns of women and girls? And
Yes.
it's a history that is so unimaginable in certain ways. The fact that we had baked into American law up until recently that marital rape was permissible.
It's crazy.
That with domestic violence, court saying, well, just shut the door and it's
Yeah.
private. In cases of incest, even, state Supreme Court saying that it would be disruptive of family harmony for the daughters to receive any recovery. And it suggests that the disruption is not the assault, the rape, the victimization. The disruption is saying, I deserve better. I should not have been harmed.
Exactly, exactly. One of the things I get frustrated with was that in 1991, as I understood laws, rape was only determined by how much you resisted. And so since I froze, I thought, well, sure, it's my fault. And the reason we only heard fight or flight is because then they were only studying men's trauma responses. They weren't even really studying women's trauma responses because, as I understand it, and you can correct me and probably know more of the actual studies and literature, we were not studied because they felt that our hormonal imbalances on a monthly basis would invalidate the study. And so that's why men, I believe, have such a hard time grasping why we freeze and why we can, in a moment of danger, through an automatic and involuntary trauma response, comply. Our body can be moving and look like we're all there when we are not there. We are not there mentally. We are not cognitively choosing it. It is happening as a defense mechanism in our bodies.
Well, it's reminiscent actually to what happens to people in war. And this is a
Mm-hmm.
very interesting thing that of all the many protections that are understood, negotiated for, and then baked into treaties and global policies that are agreed upon by governments that otherwise agree about very little. And that is an understanding of the protection of prisoners of war, an
Mm,
understanding about what is traumatic in war, an understanding about uh, things that should not take place
mhm.
in war, against soldiers, etc. And what's fascinating is that we don't have that same level of understanding for the zone of terror,
Yes.
the assault of war that is rendered on the bodies of individuals who've been sexually assaulted, abused, raped,
Yeah.
all of that. And yet, there are aspects that could be so similar if we actually just looked at the ways in which we respond to soldiers and the ways in which we try to protect soldiers and look at the ways in which soldiers shut down. This sort of
Yes.
trauma being so deeply intense that
Yes.
actually you do freeze, right? And there's
Yes.
so many aspects of that too, because I also think about this aspect of solitary confinement too. And then sort of
Mm.
sexual abuse is also something that, like, granted, there are times in which it's broad public daylight, but so much of it is cabined in a secret space.
Isolation. And what we know from research is that if we surround someone that has been traumatized, they've gone through a traumatic event, and if we surround them in safety, trust, and support within those first 24 to 72 hours afterwards, with known trusted people, and then we stay with them for up to 90 days, 3 months afterwards, we can completely diminish the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder significantly, not complete, but significantly diminish post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's the exact thing that opposite that happens for sexual assault survivors. There is so much isolation. I cowered within myself. I stopped trusting myself. So if I can't trust myself, I really struggle to trust other people, but then at the same time would reach out for other people to try to be a safe harbor for me. And we don't talk enough about the fact that sexual assault survivors have higher rates of post-traumatic stress disorder than even combat veterans. So in
That's right.
2020, the Pentagon Inspector General's managerial report came out, and it talked about sexual assault, and it said that 45% of women that are women combat veterans that went through sexual harm experienced post-traumatic stress disorder. 68% of men who experienced sexual assault in the military had post-traumatic stress disorder. Whereas if they were just combat veterans, it was 38.8.
It's significant. Jess, as you share about this journey still of working through the experiences of your life that were connected to Jeffrey Epstein, a name that now has become known worldwide, that at a particular period of time, unless you perhaps were a person who was in philanthropy at a university, you might not have known the name,
Yeah.
right? Or
Yes.
those who clearly weren't involved with the island and sexual predations, et cetera, they would know, but otherwise, somewhat obscure. But you came to know him, or at least be affected and abused by him, as did so many other young women and girls. Jess, can you tell us your story? What happened to you, and how did you meet him?
So I met him through a friend who was a fellow dancer. She was a friend, a very good friend, and my roommate. And she had been working for him for a couple of months. And after I came back from a contract, a dance contract, she was telling me all about him for about 2 months. This it was a perfect side hustle for a performing artist because he would allow her to go up to auditions. He would allow her to take contracts, leave, and come back and still have her position. He was training her to be a massage therapist. And we didn't actually call it a massage therapist, so I want to clarify. We didn't have those words, and even some areas you could get by with doing massage and not having a license, even in New York City. So at the time, it was just a great side hustle to be a masseuse.
And
And
was this in New York,
it
Jess?
was in New York City, yes.
Okay.
So I was living in New York City. I was traveling to Tokyo. I was dancing. I was modeling. I was a working professional dancer. And that's an important part of my story for people to know because I know he took advantage of a lot of people that were aspiring and hopeful, and he was giving them connections. I was working. I was successful. I was happy and thriving in my career. We're in a career that is really hard to thrive in, and doing it. And so my friend and roommate gets this incredible job. This man's going to train her. He's taking her all over the world. And she says, I only have to do 2 or 3 massages a week when I go somewhere. And then I get the rest of the time to go explore the city on my own. And that sounded like the ideal situation. And I was jealous. And she spoke so favorably about him. And I think this is important to also note because whenever I'm talking about it, I want people to understand that this is not abnormal. This is how grooming looks. It's not just the individual person that does the abuse. There are enablers around them. There are people that are enabling it, and there are people that are part of the grooming pipeline that help that predator get their fixation.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that, right? The grooming pipeline. I want you to go back to what you were saying, but I
Yeah.
want to just pause to acknowledge what you were saying, that there's a satellite of individuals around
Yes.
that are on a spectrum, some
Yeah.
who are in full knowledge, some you really should know because it's almost in your face,
Exactly.
but a variety of
But it's a
people so that these are
range.
a range.
It's a range. It's exactly what you're
It's a
saying.
range. And yeah, and so then you were saying that, okay, roommate, a little bit of envy and jealousy, but you were
Yeah.
successful, and then
Yeah.
you were placed in contact.
So I was invited to meet him because she said I got a dance contract and I'm going out of town and he needs a backup masseuse. And I said, great. And so she gave me the address, and how I even knew where I went now, like when I went back to go confirm that it was him, I actually have all my 1990s and 1980s day planners because I was a journaler and I collected all of those. And when I didn't have time to journal, I at least wanted to remember what auditions I went to, who I met. And so I jotted down in my day planner. So I have his name, his address, his phone number, his assistant's name, all in my day planner. And I show up at his office, and there's a couple of things that I think are really important to understand about when I meet him this first time. He's actually very stoic, and he's very professional, and he is very serious about someone understanding through the body to the point that he makes me feel like I don't know enough. I don't know what I'm doing, and I question whether I'm actually going to get the job. And I kind of thought I already had an in. I already thought this was he's going to train me too. He trained Christine, he'll train me too. And so he's asking me these questions out of the body that I can't answer. And he's like, okay, well, you're going to need to study this book.
And what kind of questions? Are these like anatomy questions, or
Yes.
as if
Yeah.
he's really serious, like he's in the business
He,
of massage and he
that
knows
this,
acupuncture and muscles and
like this matters to him. He only is only very serious about people that want to learn from him, and he sets himself up to be an authority. And that's the other thing that people, I hope they take out of this conversation. It's someone that set themselves up to be an authority so that I am a student of him. So he has me come around this side of the desk and he said, you're going to have to study this book. And so he opens a drawer and there is about a dozen books, the same book, the Book of Massage. And he hands it to me, and being the overachiever that I am, I go and I grab a 3-subject notebook and I start studying this book. But the most important thing I also want to say is that looking back now, him having a dozen of those books of massage, this was a strategy that had been already perfected in 1991. It's one of the reasons why I say his name and his date in my bios. I say I'm a 1991 Jeffrey Epstein survivor. So people remember, A, that this was going on so much longer than anyone is talking about. And I'm telling you that in 1991, he had his act and strategy and plan and grooming style down to a science already.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't
Mm-hmm.
talk about that. We don't talk about this
Mm-hmm.
was likely going on in the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Perfecting.
Perfecting.
So we'll come back to what happened next, but I do want to pause on what you've shared because for our listeners and the people who are adjacent to them, who want to provide support to them, who have, what you're sharing is an affirmation in many ways, right? Because it's to say that there is a planning that goes on and there is a perfecting over time of predacious behavior, and that
Yes,
predacious behavior can have its eras, era 1, era 2, era 3, and by the
yes,
time you get to era 3, era 4, where people might think that era 4 is the first era, like this is the first
exactly.
of it, but no,
Mhm.
actually it was building before. It's almost like serial killers, right? who
Yeah,
their first time out, it's a little bit sloppy, a
yes,
little bit chunky,
yep,
right? And then over time, they then further master
exactly,
this art of harm. And that's
exactly,
part of what you're sharing when you're saying the 1991 playbook of this,
exactly.
like literally had a dozen books associated with it. Right?
Yep,
Here is the kind of narrative. Open up the book, and open up the drawer, and here are all these versions of the same book.
exactly.
Yeah.
And he was already setting me up to feel and be sure that this was professional. This was only professional. And that is really important because again, that goes back to that strategy, that perfected strategy of how do I get how he could get what he wanted out of this meeting. It was already in his mind before I showed up, and this was something I had to grapple with. It was likely already in his mind that as soon as he saw me, because I looked young, I was 22, but I probably looked 16. I was a professional dancer. I was small, and I looked younger. I probably looked underage, right? I had that look, and that was a
Meeting
look
a certain profile that we know now
I
through
met.
court cases was
Yes,
something that was
yeah.
a desire of his.
Exactly. And so he already knew when he saw me exactly what was going to happen. He was just reading me to find out what was it going to take for him to get what he wanted. And that's scary to look back on because I initially felt embarrassed that I fell for all of this. But given I was recommended by a trusted friend, I mean, I never in a second questioned my friend and her experience.
Look, there are people who stay married to people who break their jaws and break their legs and put them in the hospital, and family members all know that these are not the events of falling down steps. Maybe once, maybe the first time they say, well, okay, maybe she's a little bit clumsy and she fell down the step, but 10 times, 10 steps, same flight of steps. So again, this sense of blaming oneself,
Yeah, always. Yeah, yeah.
right?
And I wanna go back to something that, you were saying earlier. The everyone in the sphere of Jeffrey Epstein was an enabler in some frame. One, if they knew nothing about what was happening, they were perfectly placed so that they could give him an alibi of good character and good intentions. And so even the people that knew nothing were being
Hmm.
groomed and
Hmm.
were enabling maybe is the wrong word. They were being groomed
Hmm.
to so that he could present a valid, professional, creative,
Just isn't
academic.
right. Well, isn't that also how people who are abusers and abusive are able to continue abusing, right? Because
Yes,
if they showed themselves to be abusive, if they
to
showed
everyone.
themselves, right, to be angry, unsophisticated, brutes, right? They
Yeah,
wouldn't be able to survive in doing what it is that they do and to
exactly.
thrive.
Exactly.
So you saw him again after that. So you get the book and you study it because now you've been put in this position that somehow there is more that you should have known about
Yes.
how to touch the body, that somehow you're
Yeah.
behind.
But
Yes.
I'm excited about the opportunity still because I know I'm a good study. I know I can learn this. And so that actually didn't deter me. I just didn't know if I actually got the job yet. But I felt pretty confident in my ability to study this book. I created a cheat sheet. Christine came home later that day and she said, Jeffrey liked you. You're going to call his office and make an appointment for a trial massage. And I felt confident. Made my cheat sheet, went in the next week, went to this penthouse, and one of the first things I said to him, and I share this in my when I share my experience, I always tell this part because I think it's really important. I was a 22-year-old badass, strong, confident, assertive dancer. I imagined that if something was going to happen to me, I would be able to take care of myself. I had the height and strength to throat kick at anyone. I had the ability to ninja my way out of anything that happened. I felt pretty confident in myself, whether that's naivete of a 22-year-old or accurate because I felt pretty sure of myself. I don't know. But the first thing I say to him is, so Jeffrey, why do you hire professional dancers when clearly you can afford to hire professional masseuses? I wasn't afraid to say that. And I think that that shows that there was such a big break in my sense of identity from when I walked into that penthouse to when I walked out. So he says to me, and I want you to note he was appealing to my ego. He said, dancers are, they take care of themselves. They have such beautiful bodies. They know so much more about the body than even, professionals do. They're amazing. And why would I want a fat personal trainer? And then he doesn't look at me anymore, drops his robe. He said, and dancers are comfortable with nudity. Now, he didn't ask me. He didn't tell me in advance. Christine didn't tell me. And so I was taken aback in that moment. And I thought, well, he didn't tell me about this and Christine didn't tell me about this. But because Christine was here, it must be safe. This still must be safe. But that was the first moment of question. And I'm going to
This
guess
moment where he takes off his robe.
he takes off his robe and he's just naked. It's not a big deal. It's just professional. It's just professional. And he lays the towel down. He lays down and grab my cheat sheet and I sit down like the studious little, young woman I am, and I lay out my cheat sheet and I'm explaining everything I learned, how much I love the book, going through the patterns.
So Jess, I mean, these sometimes horror also has humor. It's
Yeah,
sad, right?
yeah.
So
I am
it's also
overachieving.
horrible, but there it is. So he is naked. Like, is the man just like sitting in a chair, legs crossed, naked, staring at you? Has he laid himself down on
No,
a sofa?
he's laying on the floor on a towel.
Wait, okay, so the man is laying on a floor on a towel naked, right? Which also says like just the all of the perversity of it, right?
Yes,
And
yeah,
the craziness of it, and
yeah.
also the boldness, right? The unchecked,
Oh,
all
yes.
totally unchecked, because that's not the kind of thing that we would do. If someone's coming over for
Normalizing. Yep.
right? Like we don't do that. Someone's coming over for a drink, they're coming over for a
Yeah.
meal, they're coming back for a job interview. Housekeeper. So someone might say, well, why would she go over to his house? Well, there are plenty of people who go to people's houses for work.
Yeah.
People who are housekeepers do that. People who do perform massages, they actually do. There
Go
are people
to
who like to
people's
have,
house.
they
Yeah.
go to people's homes, they
Yes.
carry their tables, or maybe people don't
Yep.
want, but there are many chefs, they go to people's house. So I want people to know and understand that it is actually not unusual to go to someone's house to
Yeah.
perform work. Gardeners, people go to that. But
Christine
then
went all the time. Like,
but then the part that is crazy, and as you're saying, this part that you didn't know, is that he just takes off his robe and then he's just
yeah,
laying there on the floor in a towel
just laying
as
there.
if that's normal.
Right. And I, at one point, like, because I really enjoy dark humor, especially around these really difficult things. I joke around and I'm staring at Jeffrey Epstein's penis, and all I could think of was like, there shouldn't be any penises at job interviews, like ever.
No,
There should
well, I
never
think
be a
that you're
penis.
right.
There should never be a penis at a job interview. And we need to maybe put that in writing somewhere because that doesn't seem
Yes,
to be
right.
understood. And
Right.
so he didn't need to take off all of his clothes to do a trial interview. He could have sat there and I could have explained everything I learned. I could have shown him a couple of hand positions and that could have been enough. But he didn't. He disarmed me. It's a stepping over the boundary to see how far he can push me is what it is. It's a psychological trick to see how
Right.
far can I push you. And if you listen to any of the ways that Ghislaine Maxwell operated, that Epstein operated ever, it was just how far can I keep pushing this line to get someone to normalize what is happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The experience goes from me, studious overachiever, demonstrating all of my fabulous hand positions that I learned and really excited about learning, him initially talking about massage, then, international techniques that verge into sexual jokes, that diverge into him sitting up abruptly and going, "You're doing it wrong." And his tone completely changing and his demeanor. He's not the same person I was talking to before. I'm not saying he's angry. Everybody's like, well, yeah, he got angry at you. He didn't get angry. He just got annoyed. And he was then in that moment the authority figure. And he was like, look, I'm going to need to show you on your body what I mean. And you can take off your dress. It's fine. It's professional. Like there was no, it's so unnerving to watch that 22-year-old girl start to collapse internally in that moment when he got angry. We talked about so 48% of those that have experienced child sexual abuse will be abused later in life. And the way I explained it to my therapist at one point was when he got mad at me, I said, I turned into a stupid 5-year-old. And she said, did you experience anything at that age? And I did. I said yes. I went through child sexual abuse by my grandfather from ages 4 to 6. She said, Jessica, then you were a 5-year-old in that moment. So I kind of started to fade internally. And a lot of people say when they dissociate, they leave their body. That is not what happened to me. I sunk in and the light where my eyes went very far away from me. And I felt like I was just falling backwards into myself. I couldn't understand why I couldn't stop it. And I was just going, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want this. And I don't know why I can't stop it. And I was already starting to blame myself. I must be so stupid. Why can't I stop this? He raped me. All the while, I also want to point out a couple of minutes before he actually raped me, he said, this isn't a big deal. This is just professional. Even in that span of getting mad at me, getting annoyed, he didn't get mad at me, he got annoyed. He shifted and he's like, this is just professional. It was back to that very stoic
Mm-hmm.
demeanor.
Authoritative. And let me just say,
Authoritative. That's the word. It's authoritative. It is taking dominance in the
yeah,
moment and command of the moment, and that just triggered a
and
trauma
knowing that you
response.
right. And knowing that you can do that without recourse. Let me say, Jess, before we move, on as you continue, is that um, it's heartbreaking what happened to you. Heartbreaking what happened to you and to so many others, and that the journey to still have to educate people to understand what it is like in terms of shutting down this uh, that the fight is within the mind. It was very interesting is
Yes.
that, as
Wait, wait,
people
wait, wait,
take,
wait. What
yes,
you
yeah,
just
go
said, the
ahead.
fight is within the mind is exactly how it feels. Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. No, that's it, right? So it's not, it's as people may think, well, why aren't there scratches? And sometimes people get licks and scratches in, but it's in the mind. It is in the mind where the fight is and where there's so many thoughts that are rapidly, why am I here? How do I get out of here? What happens after I leave here? Is it going to be portrayed as this was my fault that I did this to me? Like all of those things rapidly in the mind where the fight is taking place as the body is shutting down as compliance
And the
comes
brain,
into,
I
yeah,
I, I want to also just clarify, like
yes.
what people don't understand when I get somebody comes, well, you heard the sexual jokes, he was naked, why didn't you leave? There's a the brain, the cognitive part of our brain that is the decision maker. As that part of the brain, the more primitive part of the brain, the amygdala takes over that defensive system, which is a really important and natural thing to happen, which is for us to start to freeze, start to fawn or appease, which I think is a better word. That is automatic and involuntary, and it is completely disconnected from executive functioning.
Mhm.
Automatically and involuntarily. We don't get to choose that. That's why the thinking and decision making gets confusing. If you listen to any trauma survivor, one thing they will say to you over and over again is, I was confused, this brain fog, because that part of your functioning is completely offline, completely
Well,
offline.
I think credit also has to be given to what kind of a society it is at any of those
Yes,
times. And we don't give as much credit to that. And that's
the
we can have
conditioning.
many right? Yes, it is, right?
Yep.
That somehow he made normal becoming naked and being on a towel on the floor. Someone who's very successful, who's
Yeah.
respected all around, and whose name is everywhere. So
Yeah.
who's in the wrong? It's kind of like one of those elementary shows, like which one is wrong? If he
Exactly.
has wealth, if he has power, if he has
Exactly.
influence, if he has go, then who are you or anybody else to then feel uncomfortable, which is seems like what he's saying or sharing, right?
It
That
was
it's
the
the
perfect
oddity
fit.
is not with him.
Yeah.
The oddity is any question of that. Well, how after he harms you, what happens next for you?
So I don't remember getting dressed. He actually gets up and he throws money. I can hear the crinkled money and he puts it on the table. And he says, "Call my assistant next week for another appointment." So that was very confusing. And I actually did a podcast with Laura Richards, who is the crime analyst, and she analyzes criminal behavior. And she said that moment of putting the money there and then saying call again, that was again another moment of just normalizing everything, just complete, like
Mhm.
nothing nothing untoward happened here.
Mhm.
Look, see, I'm giving you this money for it. It's a job, it's there's nothing went wrong here. So I leave and I'm so confused. And I remember walking past the doorman and like just thinking how different I was as a human. Just I had lost something. My life had just changed immeasurably from when I had walked past him to go up to the penthouse. I got on the subway going the wrong way. I was still mute by the next day. I couldn't speak. When I had a friend at work ask me, "Hey, how are you doing? What's up?" And she asked me three
Mhm.
times. I
Mhm.
couldn't respond. And she grabbed me and she brought me into the office, and that was when I broke down crying. I told her what happened, and I didn't even tell her everything. I just told her enough. And she said, in 1991, she said, "Jessica, we need to go to the police." And I, in that moment, realized, oh, it is bad. And then I also thought, oh, and I froze, and no one's gonna believe me. No one's gonna believe me. I'm a 22-year-old dancer, and he's this wealthy guy. No one's. He wasn't known then. He didn't have this household name, obviously, and so all I knew him as was this wealthy Wall Street guy that had a penthouse and a plane. And I thought, but nobody's gonna believe. It's gonna be a he said, she said moment. So I just thought, I'm not going to ever tell anyone this ever.
Did you ever go back again? Did you talk to your roommate about what happened?
No, so we were in a dancer apartment, which meant we were all leaving and coming and going, and I had another contract, and I left on a modeling contract for 2 months. But when I came back, I was so scared to be in New York City, the place I had worked years to get to. Like this was I loved New York City. I and when I came back on the plane from Tokyo from that second modeling contract, I was in an audition within 24 hours off of getting out of that plane and had another job taking me out of the city because I just was so scared to be there.
Hmm.
Wasn't eat. My stomach was upset all the time. I had headaches. I had insomnia. I had anxiety. But we didn't call it anxiety in the 90s. We didn't have that
Hmm.
word. We didn't walk around saying, I have an anxiety disorder. No, no. I didn't know what it was. I just was anxious all the time and my stomach was upset. And within 6 months after being assaulted, I had lost so much weight. I could pull a pair of size zero jeans down off of my hips without unbuttoning them. And I
Hmm.
didn't need to necessarily lose any weight.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so the physical, I asked a friend of mine when I shared with her what had happened. I finally started sharing what had happened. And she was a friend that I had just met 3 months after that the assault
Hmm.
happened. I said, "What do you remember about me back then when you met me?" And she said, "I just remember that you slept all the time."
Jess, as Epstein's name has come back into the news, I'm wondering at what point was it where for you the that seemed to be this added recognition that you were part of, or you had a story that was connected to this legacy, as it turns out. Was there a time? When was that time?
Yeah.
If there was that time where you thought, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, it's that guy.
So I was actually working from home and I was scrolling through my phone just reading the news on a lunch break and I saw his face. And I all of a sudden, before I remembered everything about what happened, I saw his face and my whole body started to react. I started to sweat. I started to have trouble breathing. I started to get shaky. My hands started just getting sweaty and I started feeling really uncomfortable in my body. And then I start reading the article and it is Julie K. Brown's Perversion of Justice. And at first I couldn't read it. Like I didn't read it right away and I didn't remember his name. I couldn't quite remember his name. I went and I looked up my day planners to see if I could find it and I found his name. And do you know what I had done? Next to his name and address, I wrote asshole. I had written asshole way back in 1991 and I never looked at it again. I had never even didn't remember it. I just saw it and I was like, oh my God, it is him. And I start reading the article and it's again the holding really complex emotions at the same time. I'm sitting there and I'm crying about what happened and at the same time going, oh my God, it wasn't my fault. And I'm not the only one. Like, it wasn't my fault. Like, the whole time, that was the first big wave of weight being lifted was that it wasn't my fault because I berated myself. No one was harder on me than I was. Berated myself for 30 years and blamed myself for so long, and I was wrong. And if there's one thing I hope that any of your listeners will hear me is that I was wrong that whole time, believing that it was ever my fault, ever. Nothing I did was my fault for being raped.
The work that you've been doing has been to bring greater recognition and greater visibility, the ability to be able to see folks who have been sexually assaulted. And your organization, Three Joannes, you've emphasized the importance of changing the culture around assault, and you've also lifted up principles around there being sexual assault first aid.
Yes,
Can you
yes.
tell us about that?
Yes, I would love to tell you about that, and I want to tell you how I started thinking about it. One of the reasons sexual assault first aid even came to me was because I had been looking around for how do we teach people how to respond better to victims, because my mission is to lift that burden of shame and stigma off of survivors and bring in more of a community peer-based support system, not focus on it being a crime to send us off to somebody else, not focus on, oh, well, you need to go to therapy, but how do we get families, friends, colleagues, community to be better support? So I found this incredible workshop by two gentlemen from Johns Hopkins University, and it was called Psychological First Aid. And I was so excited, and it's a free class, and you can order the book, and I'm looking at the book and I'm reading it. And it says, psychological first aid is really good for any situation that you're in. I mean, they labeled everything: active shooter situations, mass shootings, war, weather-related problems, getting mugged, having your house burned down. Do you know what they named every single thing except sexual harm? And so I actually got into the group and I was like, hey, by the way, I'm a 1991 Jeffrey Epstein survivor. And it seems you missed out on the thing that causes most post-traumatic stress disorder than almost any other of the things that you're listing. And I hope that if you decide to, you'll add this in the future. And if you need any help, I would love to talk with you about it. Well, a couple of years later, they did come out with a second version. And I was so excited. I was like, well, they didn't reach out, but hey, maybe they got something here. They added a paragraph. And so I thought, since you're not going to do it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make sexual assault first aid. And so what that is just like any other form of pre-crisis protocol. We should all know what to do when something happens. And we should know how to handle getting a disclosure from someone, not just believe in that moment, but what do I do in 2 weeks when they can't get off the couch? What do I do in a month when they decide to drop out of college because they got raped at a party? What do I do in 2 months when now they're finally feeling like they want to go to the police, but they never reported before? What are the things that we can do for, like I described, those first 90 days to help someone feel safe? Because sexual assault for me, and this is our mission, is sexual assault is an injury first, before it's an interrogation, before it's an investigation, before it's any of those things, before it's a crime. We want people to respond to it like someone has been injured. And I've said this in other interviews. If I called you up and I said, hey, I went to this party last night and I got raped, our natural responses from a societal conditioning is, let's go to the police. I want to change that, because when we say, I call you up and the next day after I've gone to a party, I say, I got in a car accident, your first response is, are you okay? It's a different response. It's a different understanding of what both of those two things is. And so we're actually a for-profit company. We're a public benefit corporation. We are also going to be certified B Corp. We are using the opportunity to have the vast scale of this problem help support nonprofits. So we will be giving back revenue into nonprofits that are on the ground and have been doing this work for a really long time and who are now struggling because of the administration cutting services for sexual assault survivors. So we're really hoping to change how people respond to this so that we can have less people walking around with post-traumatic stress disorder and then being able to get justice if they want it and in whatever way they want.
Jess, what's yours? I could spend so much time talking with you, and we're coming towards the end of our interview. I wonder what would be the counseling, the advice that you would give to the 22-year-old Jess a couple weeks after that traumatizing experience. If she came to you, what would you tell her?
What would I tell her now? That it was never her fault. that her body actually did exactly what it should do in that moment to preserve itself. It did what it was supposed to do, and it was never supposed to just stay stuck like that for 30 years. But I would also tell her right now, like, how proud I was of her. Like, that, because despite that, she really just kept trying. A friend sent me this really sweet text, and she's like, all I keep picturing is you now being this eloquent, speaker and sharing about this, reaching down her hand to 22-year-old Jess and saying, look what we're going to do.
It's beautiful. Jess, on our show, we handle thorny, weighty issues in so many regards, but we try to wrap up with thinking about what comes next in terms of hope, silver linings, what is there that's uplifting. And we do that in part that's forged from this sense of surviving and thriving. How do you transform all that is of ill will and all of which may be painful and harsh even, such that we can create a better future? And so many communities have done that. So,
Yeah.
guys, what do you see as a silver lining, even as you've experienced it's something so traumatically horrible and that has a legacy of horror? But what do you see as hope or silver lining?
I think the biggest piece of hope I would like to pass on to everyone that's listening is there was another myth that we have all grown up with. And that myth is that you can't heal, that you will be stuck with this forever. It will weigh you down. You will never be the same. And as someone that lived with post-traumatic stress disorder for 30 years and will always live with those symptoms, I am always navigating and mitigating those symptoms. But what I can tell you is the time that I've spent in trauma therapy with a really good therapist, and the time that I've spent surrounding myself with safe, trustworthy, supportive people, you can heal and you can thrive, and you do not have to be weighed down by what has happened. You can alchemize it into whatever fulfilling purpose you find. And that can be anything. It can be in creating the most beautiful garden that brings beauty to the world. For me, it's creating an app, but we all get to choose how we alchemize that.
Jess Michaels, it's been wonderful spending time with you. Thank you so much of giving of yourself such that we could have this conversation today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an honor to speak with you.
Listeners, if the issues raised in our episode reach close to home for you or someone that you know and care about, please know that help is available. The organization RAIN offers free confidential support through its hotline 24/7. You can learn more at rain.org, that's RAINN.org, or by calling 1-800-656-HOPE, that's HOPE, or texting the word HOPE to 64673. This has been your host, Michele Goodwin, reporting, rebelling, and telling it just like it is on the Issues with Michele Goodwin and 15 Minutes of Feminism, our Ms. Magazine and Ms. Studios joint productions. I, Michele Goodwin, am the executive producer of Ms. Studios. Our producers for this episode are Roxy Zoll, Oliver Hogg, Allison Whalen, and our Ms. Studios intern, Emerson Panagrahi. The creative vision behind our work includes art and design by Brandy Phipps, editing by Natalie Hodlin and Emerson Panagrahi, and music by Chris J. Lee.